controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a science here to make things make sense.
Before we start, I just thought of something I want to say is I like miss our comment corner jingle because it was my favorite one, but I want to comment on the fact that I do read the comments on YouTube, and I know this is on YouTube, and thank you so much for commenting. And I always read them like a week later, and then I'm like, oh, should I respond? Do people even get notified when they get responses on YouTube? Like, I don't know, but I read them.
You're the YouTuber.
Yeah, I don't understand YouTube, but thank you. Everyone has like such interesting discussions. I'm sure it will be interesting to see what people think about eco-anxiety, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I know we don't highlight like comments as much as we used to.
Yeah, well, we should do it.
Maybe we should bring it back. Let us know if you want us to bring it back.
Yeah, read the comments and then bring them on here. We'll answer.
That's true. Maybe I'll just pick some of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
Like, especially when they're interesting discussions, it's just how do you talk about a previous episode in a new episode? It's like we got to find a space.
Yeah, well,
no,
Common Corner.
Anyway, eco-anxiety.
Wow. That was a good song.
Do you have it?
Okay, so
Let's talk about what it is first.
Okay, I Googled like eco-anxiety. Like it was literally like a week ago, and I was like, I'm gonna start like thinking about this. Like, could this be a video? I'm just like, okay, we'll start. Oh gosh, eco-anxiety, and then just like this thing came up and was just like, so like, was a cloudy and cold winter in the Arctic. So it was only the 4th worst for sea ice in total, 14th worst for sea ice in total. But when we look at this graph, it is devastating how much sea ice is now leaving in the summer. And it was just a photo, and I know this is so basic, of a polar bear, like on a thing, and I was just like. I felt so fucked up. I felt so sad. And I was just like reading it, and I felt so much anxiety. And I was like, oh, this is eco-anxiety. Like, I was like, I'm going through it right now as I read this thing. Because it was like, and then I started to actually understand the definition. But it was like, oh, I have it all the time. Because if you read any science journal paper, which like we have to do for our job, and I love to do, it's constantly giving you eco-anxiety. Like, it's just like, and that's me, like, even like, I don't know.
Well, you might be more engaged than a lot of people.
Wait, now I'm like, do I have it worse?
Well, I think the hard part is maybe you were more prepared and already knew this was coming and have had more time to deal with it. I think there are lots of young people in particular who are now seeing how dire the warnings are from scientists and research. And as a result, you know, sometimes we're hearing like, if we don't hit these targets in the next 10 years, we're fucked. And then I think people are like, wait, I'm literally 16 and can't do anything about it anyway. Like, what's supposed to happen?
Oh my God, I'm having eco-anxiety.
I think it is just, I have a lot of eco-anxiety because it is like you hear all these awful things and there's a point where you go, we can't change it.
And I do have a fear.
And I think for me, it's like really tied into thinking about like, God, we're always going to be like capitalism, but just the systems in place and how hard it will be to change those at a fast enough rate because everyone's intertwined. So are we. Like, of course, we rag on capitalism, but we still are using technology and buying stuff. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but it's difficult to disentangle yourself from the system that you're part of.
Okay, so the actual definition of eco-anxiety is a fear of environmental damage or ecological disaster. The sense of anxiety is largely based on the current and predicted future state of the environment and human-induced climate change. And it's like, okay, like that's such a good definition. That's exactly what we all have.
Yeah.
For sure, we're going to have to talk about capitalism. But then I was like, okay, like, is it real? And so I like went, or like, am I just like read? And then I went and found a study of 10,000 people aged 16 to 25.
Okay.
From a diverse.
Does that make you sad when it's like so young and you're like, I used to be part of that group?
Oh my God, no, I'm just actually like these young, beautiful people. We must help them. Like I literally am like, because we're old.
No, I know, but we're like about to hit that final mark, which, and obviously it doesn't matter in the pandemic, but 35, sometimes things are like 35 and under, you get a cheaper ticket. It used to be 30 and under, and I'm just like, we are about to pass the final benchmark.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Whenever I'm like, they're studying the youth, I'm like, I used to be a youth.
Yeah, you're paying full price for everything for the next 20 years, that's for sure, until you become senior. So anyway, 16 to 25-year-olds, 10,000 of them, diverse countries. Okay. And they were like, yes, okay, this is a serious issue amongst them. Like it was a large survey of not just about eco-anxiety, but they threw in questions about like does it make you sad? Yeah. So the 68% said it made them sad. 57% said it made them feel powerless, but then 32% were optimistic, even though they had like deep fear. Like they were really, so everyone is fearful, but I just thought it was interesting to think that 68 were sad. Like I'm trying to get into anxiety.
Yeah.
57% felt powerless. To me, that would lead to anxiety.
Yes. I am so excited to talk about my study because it links so interestingly to this. Don't read it. I want it to be a surprise.
I'm not.
I know you're not,
say
but
it.
whenever Greg, no, I want to keep talking more. And it's just like,
Just say it. Just say it.
No, it's like keep talking. Keep
Oh,
talking.
well, it was just that the highest
I'll get
proportion.
to it. It's just fascinating.
Okay. The highest proportion of the saddest people were in Philippines, India, and Brazil. And people were like, those are places that face climate change more viscerally. But that was a theory they had.
Yeah.
But 65% was a number for US. And there wasn't data on Canada.
65 was the amount of the young people.
16 to 25s who felt sad and powerless. So that's a pretty high number.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen it become a bigger conversation, even on like TikTok and stuff. Because I think there is this element, especially as science communicators, like of course we're thinking we have to make people understand, like, and as scientists who are like, oh my God, screaming at the top of their lungs, like everything's gonna be bad if we don't do something. But then now we're seeing the impact of that
I know.
into making people feel so anxious that I think that it's like actually impacting
Yeah.
their bodies and minds
Yeah.
and ability to function in normal life sometimes in the extreme examples.
I think that's true. Like, I think that what part of the reason why I think we could actually make a change, and my second thing I want to talk about is how we could to help people with their eco-anxiety, is like we have to have visceral experiences with it. And it's so sad, but like it's happening across the world where everyone's having it. And so I do think that could help the change, but it's really sad. And this summer I felt it. Like I always bring it
Feels
up,
like
but it's
more
like
than
the
ever.
forest fires like billowing over the show we were filming was
Yeah.
really sad. And I felt a lot of anxiety and
I
sadness. I was
have
like, we're gonna
never
die.
had allergies as bad as in the last year or two. Every like summer, I've
Yeah.
always kind of some
We're all gonna
summers I don't have them.
suffer.
Last summer was easily the worst allergies, the longest allergies I've had for so long, because the season's so much longer. I think, or like the the conditions are changing so much, and I do think it. To me, it feels like as much as maybe the change isn't happening as fast as people want, it does feel like there's a bit of a switch in terms of the, average person being like, oh, or average person in like North America, for example, or Canada where we live. Oh, it's happening. It's happening here. It's making an impact. Even if it's not like completely inconveniencing us, being able to literally see it with our eyes, smoke covering the sky for like days at a time is disturbing.
Okay, wait, I want you to explain your study because I think I'm going to say something that's going to relate to it.
Okay. So basically, eco-anxiety is one aspect of these things called eco-concerns. So it can be broken down into like subcategories of eco-anxiety, eco-depression, and eco-anger. Now, they typically occur together, but this study wanted to look at what are the impact of these three different emotional states. Like, is it good to have them? Can they lead to action? Does it make people complacent or sad or, like you said, feel hopeless? Previous studies define or have found that depression is a deactivating emotion, so it's unlikely to motivate you.
Yeah.
Anxiety is an activating emotion provoking avoidance of threat, which is like the flight response. And anger is an activating emotion associated with approach tendencies, which is like your fight response. So both anxiety and anger can be action in different ways. But this study was looking at youth in Australia, is where it was held, like all over the country. And basically, the participants would rate themselves same sort of way, like, do they feel depressed, anxious, afraid, angry, frustrated about eco-anxiety, or about the future of climate change. Sorry, I don't know, it's so hard. And what they found was that those who had eco-anger not only had better mental health outcomes, they were more engaged in pro-climate activism and personal behaviors. But people who had eco-anxiety and eco-depression were less adaptive and had lower well-being. So,
Okay, this is so interesting.
so they were less likely to join the cause because anxiety and depression made you feel bad enough that you would like remove yourself from the situation. And so it was just like a really interesting discussion, realizing obviously those things can happen together. So the study was trying to parse out if people experience them in isolation, what does that lead to? And ultimately was that like anger is potentially an adaptive emotion that drives people to engage with the climate crisis and not feel like they have to disengage with it.
Okay, that's so interesting. So like oh my God, I don't even know where to start. but it's like, okay, first of all, it's really smart to think about how you create action and how it can be really smart to create specific types of anger that aren't going to make the people who don't believe in climate change or don't want to change mad.
Right, push back.
Yeah, exactly. So
Because
it's like
they're like, oh, you're being so over the top.
which is
or
so
angry.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of like this YouTuber I watched recently who was kind of really funny, but he clearly is attacking the climate crisis from just going for like comically bad oil tycoons. And it's like, that's a smart thing to do
Right,
because it's
everyone
like,
can get behind
yeah.
it. Yeah.
And then it's like, he also made one about fast fashion and like, it's sad, but like it's on YouTube. So it's like a misogynist place. I'm like, oh yeah, making fun of shopping is like a smart way
easy
to get like men
digs.
to be like, yeah, like it's so stupid.
Right.
So it's like, I'm just saying like, those are smart ways to use anger. Like you have to be careful. So another thing I was thinking about was we made a video about the Green New Deal and like essentially like in the sneakiest way possible, explained it and how like we think it's really important to the future and will be very beneficial economically and all these things. And I was reading the comments and like so many people love it, but there's like this crazy intense group of people who are like think what we did was saying engineers aren't good at what they do because it's like
Why?
Because we're saying the grid needs to change.
Oh, and it's not.
And it's like
been
it's like
prepared
they
for.
think that like because we were like and the US grid was like actually rated one of the worst in like the developing like the people were like engineers and people in that world being like we work really hard and like you don't like this was so mean almost to like how amazing what we've done is. It was so
Weird.
interesting, but it made me realize they got angry.
Right.
So it's like okay, you have to figure out how to make anger because then now that means that they're like that's a mobilizing emotion you just said like to make someone angry about vaccines.
I mean, anger might be different than being upset.
No, but like I'm saying like anger, like if you're thinking about vaccines, people who are on the quote unquote other side from you feel angry and that can mobilize them. So if you do something that makes them angry, they might become more...
I just don't think like, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just like, in that case, I don't think those engineers are then going to be like, well, because you made me angry, I'm going to not believe in climate change and keep the grid shitty.
No, I never said that. I said like, it just made me think of that emotion as one
perspective on that video because it is so niche. And definitely that video was not intending to do that.
No, but it makes you realize like with these intense things like climate change, like vaccination, like very scientific public health things, there's anger on both sides. Mm-hmm. And it's like if we are saying and acknowledging that anger can be a really motivating force, we have to be so nuanced with how we use it to not have it literally blow up in our face.
Yeah, and I guess it's like when you think of it from the outside, anger has always been a motivating force, and that can be really dangerous as well.
Yeah.
Like you don't want people to be so angry that they would be violent or that they would be awful to other people. This, in terms of anger, and they didn't like define anger in this case, but they helped explain it by saying like, by thinking about experiences of injustice or unfairness, that tended to provoke group-based anger and motivated like action together. So it wasn't like being pissed off, although I'm sure it could be, but it was more like being upset about what there's people in this world that are going to suffer way before us, and that's like so unfair, and that makes me angry. I want to help. Versus like the world's going to be destroyed and that gives me anxiety. Oh my God, I need to like just stop trying anything.
So we have to figure out how to make videos about the climate crisis that talk about injustice. And like I think a lot of people do that and try to do that.
And I think you're right. That kind of finding the angle of like who's punching up? Oil tycoons. Like who's it okay to for us to be like angry at billionaires? It's like people who are just wasting money on stupid stuff that's not helping anyone when they could help in so many ways. And of course some rich people help, whatever, but I don't know. I'm just like, of course, someone out there is going to be like,
what? That's such a good way to be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, don't know why you're yelling about that on the internet. Like, okay, cool, let's chill out. That's so funny.
Yeah, but so do you think you have genuine any of these? Where would you feel like you fit into one of those categories? Eco depression, eco
That's
anxiety,
so weird. I feel like I
eco
flux
anger?
between them. So like, I think I like flux between them all, but I do think I'm happiest and most motivated when I'm eco angry. Like I totally think that.
See that.
Like that's like a really cool thing that maybe it's just confirmation bias because I just learned it. But yeah, when I'm angry, when I educate myself about an injustice is when I make a video about it. Truly, like actually. And I think the only reason, like, I guess we should talk about our show. October 26th it comes out. We get like, oh my god, we're so bad at our job. Okay. But anyways, we have a TV show coming out about the climate crisis. The only reason I felt any motivation to do that was because I was angry. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so it's just interesting. Okay, do you want me to talk about these lawsuits?
Sure.
Because it links to anger.
I was just going to say that I feel that I have more eco-anxiety, and this made me feel I never thought that it could be separated into sort of different categories, but then I equally was like, this does make sense to be like, and the paper didn't have necessarily like a way to change someone from eco-anxiety to eco like anger or whatever, but they were mostly talking about like science communicators and people how you teach
look
about
at me.
it.
I hope you get more eco-angry.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah,
I think you can. I think you could do that. I think you get eco-angry and do cool shit.
It just does give me that fear base of like, I don't know, like that is what some awful people in this world also rely on is anger, you know? And it's like, how do you, maybe there's a different way to phrase it. Like the word anger can maybe come off the wrong way.
I think it's important just to be aware
maybe
of that.
Eco-frustration.
But
they use that word sometimes too.
Oh, okay. But I think it's just, we also need to be aware of that. Like people who are anti-vax think it's an injustice, and it's like, oh, that's so idiotic. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're like, well, they're like, okay, like literally just like every kid that goes to school needs to be vaccinated. Like, you know what I mean? Like the only reason we live long, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like, no, it's an injustice to not get vaccinated. Like, you know what I mean? But they're thinking it's an injustice, and that's creating so much anger and motivation. You know what I mean? It's like it's still good to just know the other side, like whatever can do it too, and let's all figure out how we can just make the world a place that we can actually survive in.
So you're talking about lawsuits, you said?
Yeah. Okay. So there's this concept in like, now I'm saying eco movement. Like I'm just like eco whatever, but like when we think about young people trying to address climate change and like fight for their lives, I think that eco anxiety is something that they have, but this is a really cool thing that everyone should learn about and be like, could we do this in our own province, country, whatever? So essentially, it's like a bunch of environmental lawsuits filed against governments and corporations from a variety of like activist groups, and like all the supreme courts of the different countries slowly like setting precedents that like we're getting closer and closer to being able to like maybe legally deal with this issue, which is which if we're capitalism is the issue. A lot of capitalism and law are linked. If we can figure out some law avenues, we could like whatever. Yeah. And there's also a really incredible book, like fiction book, Ministry of the Future, where they talk about this a lot. And like it's like speculative fiction. But essentially, a Dutch case recently happened against Shell that was passed. Like essentially, they were like, you need to decrease your carbon emissions by 45% in the next 10 years, and that started 10 years ago, and it was 2020 when they were assessing it. And they only decreased their CO2 rates by 24%. So now
what was 45 is what they were required?
Okay. So then therefore they're getting sued for a shit ton of money.
Well, hopefully it's enough money that they didn't just make more off of that. Like this is the problem is so many companies.
Wait. But let me finish. Okay. No, you're right. Like you mean because they don't care about the financial aspect of it?
If they made more money by not reducing their emissions and they get sued, if they get sued 50 and they made 100, then it's worth it for them.
Okay, so sorry, they didn't explain whether like they were just like Shell was like, oh, never mind, I'm evil, but they made it seem like it was significant. Okay, like that's true. I never really thought of that.
I was just gonna say outside of that, that's why companies even like Google and Facebook do all these illegal things because they know the slap on the wrist is $100 million, but they made $1 billion.
Okay, we're trying to help young people feel hopeful, and it's like, you know what? Also, it's like, fuck your evil, then you stupid. Okay, whatever. There, eco anger. There, you got eco anger. You got eco anger. You're like so mad at my. Okay, just let me like. We're trying. Okay, like you're right. You're right. That's probably like could have happened, but it set a precedent because never had this happened before in history. We're now in the court of law. Right. The government is saying that Shell has killed their citizens and harmed their citizens.
And as a result, will be held responsible.
And will be held responsible. Yeah. What they're being held for right now, it's saying financial, but they aren't actually sure. It's happening right now.
I think I did maybe see something about this. Yeah,
Okay, so-
and that is it is interesting. You're right. The precedent set, regardless of the amount, to be able to say you actually were responsible for
harming
uncounted deaths that we
Dutch
can't-
civilians.
Yeah.
So this is the other thing that's happening too. So South Korean activists are suing on the grounds of human rights violations against their government, saying, and it's starting to go up in the courts in South Korea, which is like really like another place that's like I think really important. There's things in America which a lot of people have. That's what you maybe have heard about because they're talking about it recently, and it hasn't. Like the American courts keep like shutting everything down. Of course they are. It's like of course it's like fucking Dutch that are like doing it first. But anyways, they're like shutting it all down, but they do think it's gonna impact Joe Biden in like 3 different sort of like courts in America where like he probably will start to like recognize some aspects that is harming kids in America.
Okay.
But they were saying the IPCC and the Paris Agreement, like there's certain things coming up, right? And the Paris Agreement's coming up. They're trying to figure out how to get lawyers, like really smart scientists and legal scholars to work together to use all the Paris Agreements that were signed to then, if people don't do it, say you have now killed your citizens around every country that doesn't do it, which is so
But then
interesting.
who are you responsible to? Like at least in the Dutch version, they're saying, hey, you're a company and you killed our citizens. But
Everyone who signed the Paris Agreement.
I
all the
know, but
countries.
who do they pay? Who do they consequence?
Oh,
to?
sorry. It's not that like the way that you're right. Like this is just why it's like this hasn't even happened. They're hoping it would. It would just mean legally.
It means something.
Legally, we can all collectively get hopefully eco anger at the fact that it has been set in law, in the court of law, that the government
like there has to
killed,
be now
ruined
a
its
consequence
citizens.
for that.
Because it's like unprecedented in human history, kind of. But it's like that's interesting to me. And then there's also some things happening to plastic companies and companies that cause deforestation in some countries to be sued for killing youth around a certain age or harming.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That's
it's
great.
just
No, that is
interesting,
good, and it is obviously necessary. Like it is crazy to think all these countries sign an agreement and then just don't have to live up to it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, what Shell tried to sue, like their lawyers tried to use was that if they didn't produce the oil, then other people would just come and produce it and nothing would happen. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's not true. That's a bullshit. Like that was their main argument. And the Supreme Court sided with the other people.
do you think I saw something today, and I don't want to mess this up, but there's like some woman who was part of like the Holocaust, like a German Nazi who's being held responsible. She's like 91 or something, and they're like putting on her on the count for like thousands and thousands of deaths and like whatever. She like didn't show up to court, so they're like putting her in jail at 90 or something like that. And I was just thinking, like, do you think something like this could happen to like oil execs and stuff in the future when people are like, you know what I mean? Like you literally, like this woman's being held on trial now, like how, almost 100 years later, not 100, obviously she's not even 100.
Well, that's so interesting because, I mean, that is like so funny. It's like, I fucking hope that there are, but in a weird way, why eco-anxiety is so fascinating, why the climate change movement is so integral is that the Holocaust happened in a finite time, and then there was a world war, and anti-Semitism still exists around the world, but the Holocaust is over.
Right.
Climate change is a gradual thing that does not, quote unquote, ever end until either humans are deeply suffering or wiped out. It's like, you know what I mean? It's such an existentially different issue for everyone that it's like
different.
It's like
and it won't be as
I don't think
easy
oil
to
tycoons are going to be
pinpoint.
put in jail. And in fact, if you're
They might.
Ministry of the Future, know what it is? They're going to be sniped and murdered. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's other worlds
that's
where
the real ego.
like shit's gotten so bad, and it's like, okay, in the book, this is such a crazy plotline. Read this book. People travel by air way less because it's like it became so expensive that only rich people were traveling by air, and rich people are who caused climate change. That all these eco terrorists were just blowing up planes. That people kind of stopped flying planes. And there's a really epic scene where like these eco terrorists like infiltrate Davos because it's like Davos is an interesting thing where it's like, okay, all you rich people are getting together, fucking do something. Like Greta Thunberg's like fucking yelling at you. That's the only thing that happens, and then you just go back to your thing. They just like someone that there's a terrorist attack at Davos. It's a fascinating book. Ministry of the Future.
I was gonna say, like, is there anything we can think about that for someone who is eco anxious, like to kind of minimize that anxiety.
Yeah, no, we just get out there and we snipe the head Exxon. I'm
Stop.
kidding.
Oh my God, Gregory. I
No.
don't think you can.
Canceled. It's like, am I canceled? Actually, like, no, fuck that. But anyways, whoa, I might get sniped myself. Actually, for saying that. Yeah, I think eco anger is so interesting. I think educating ourselves about the injustices of climate change is a really smart way.
Anxiety is my question.
Oh, I'm only using your research, and it's to turn it into anger and to turn it into action and to like actually educate yourself about the injustices, which was in your study. I think that's so interesting. That's what I'm taking away. And I'm going to try and do more of that because it's true. Whenever I'm reading about climate change and reading about its impacts is when I'm motivated. And then sometimes I just read a book of poetry or like read a fiction novel, which I love, but I do fall out. You know what I mean? You have to actively stay engaged to have the eco anger to do something. Maybe.
Yeah. I would say like to fight the anxiety, two things. One, like there are so many amazing cool things that are being created every day. Like think about even the fact, I know this is still under capitalism, but think of the fact that like Beyond Meat and all these meat alternatives are coming about.
And now you're gonna say like Beyonce
it
went vegan.
or like, you know, we know solar and we know wind are becoming so much more affordable and so much more mainstream and
there's crazy nuclear reactors.
Yeah, the world is changing, and as much as it's a slow response, it is at least happening. But the second thing I was thinking about was like sometimes I feel in the moment when I hear these things that it's too late. It's too late. But I think the truth is that it's never too late.
It's not.
And any incremental change matters, right?
Also,
so even if we can't hit the target we wish we could, it doesn't mean it's not worth it at all now to keep fighting for a worse target.
I always think about that. And it's a constant thing that is said in a lot of climate activist like circles, which is that like, okay, this is the way I would describe it. Is like almost like I want to explain to people how time works. It's like time is a finite thing in the laws of nature where we are. Not in all parts of the universe. Black holes are so fucking crazy. But time, it's like, if you don't do anything, it means it gets worse. You know what I mean? Like everything that we do, like you're still, time still moves forward. Every action has a reaction. These are laws of nature. So you can't just avoid it by ignoring it because it's already bad. You're going to make it worse for yourself. Like I feel like there's like this weird complacency that you're like, oh, I don't have to worry about it because I'm going to be dead or something. It's like, no, that actually A is selfish, B isn't even the case anymore. And it's like you now have kids, you now have people that you care about in your life. You, in order to, for time, a real thing to continue, this is also going to get worse. And anything that you don't do now is going to make it like more detrimental for your own life in the future.
I don't think that's not. I think you're right. I don't know if that alleviates people's anxieties, though.
Yeah, no, you're right. Actually,
maybe makes it worse.
More just makes it's more me trying to get people to think about it.
I was kind of just trying to go the angle of like, you know, if you quit smoking at any age, it's actually still significant.
Yeah.
Yes, they say like if you quit it in your 30s or 20s, it's like you can fully recover your lungs. If you start exercising at any age or any physical like
and
part
nature
of your health,
is amazing.
Like, hold on, you're cutting me off.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to say nature is amazing. That's
no,
it.
It's like incremental change is important at any stage. And so that's all I was going to say. It's like you can start at any time and it doesn't mean that you've missed the train or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what Jane Goodall's like little tour right now is just that nature is amazing and it can, you know what I mean? If we take care of it now, it can actually come back in amazing ways and help us. It's not, you know what I mean? Like it's true. Like,
well, nature will win no matter what.
Sorry, I mean like to like come and allow us humans to live again, like in tandem with it better. Like it can. Yeah. It's something
what a cool
that can, like,
goal to try and literally live in a sustainable way with the earth. Like how interesting of a goal is that? How can we live on this planet in a way where everything around us can thrive? Because we keep learning more and more. It's just like if it thrives, we thrive. You know, like as we deplete the soil, everything gets worse. So why not just like try to be in balance with the earth? Of course, these are things that many cultures have done around the world for generations, but it's just hit this point where it's like that has to be, it feels like a noble goal and it feels like interesting and cool and humans could be, maybe it was that book Braiding Sweetgrass that you read and we started listening to, or it was like just being like how, I don't know, humans, so many people view humans as separate from nature, but we are the same and we can be part of the solution as well.
Yeah,
like we aren't just a parasite on this planet. Yes, there are things we're doing that are kind of parasites to the planet, but I just think we can be part of that solution. It can be like beautiful. for humans to also be the solution.
Yeah. Okay.
Bada boom, bada bing. Get that Italian. Is that Italian? Bada boom, bada bing.
I mean, it's like East Side Mario's.
I thought it was like Joey from Friends or something.
It was like it was bada boom, bada bing Italian.
I thought it was. I think it is. I'll look it up. Sure. No. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hopefully that's subsided. Some of your anxiety or given you thoughts. I'd be curious what everyone thinks about this. So feel free to send us your comments and thoughts, and I will read them. I promise. And hopefully I can respond back. Okay.
Peace.
Bye.